Welcome to Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast. I am Russell Brown, and alongside me, as always, the Michael Jordan of Rhode Island, Brad Kelly. Brad, how we doing, brother?
Excellent. Excited for the episode. It's been a while since we've done this, so I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, no doubt. Been 2 weeks since episode 63, so now we're into episode 64. And like I've mentioned before, just this part of the year, always tough for myself with my son's baseball and everything else, but it ends this coming week. So next week, we should be right back on schedule and pumping out the content as always. Today's show, episode 64, is brought to you by First Down Playbook. First Down Playbook is the number one playbook resource for football coaches with over 30,000 plays. First Down Playbook is a database of youth, high school, and flag football plays, color-coded with coaching points for every position on every play. Check it out today at firstdownplaybook.com. That's First Down Playbook, one place, all the football. So today's show, we've got some discussion on Ole Miss wide receivers, a piece that you put together for your summer series on the top wide receiver tandems in college football. And then we'll do a little bit of take your pick between Rashan Gary and Ed Oliver. I think those are the consensus top two defensive linemen outside of Joey Bosa's brother, Nick Bosa from Ohio State. And then we'll do our rankings of the top 10 wide receivers in the NFL. So we'll see how it goes, and we'll try to get you out in a quick episode because Brad's got dinner to do, and so do I. So let's do this thing. Episode 64. Brad, the Ole Miss wide receivers, are they the best wide receiver tandem in the country?
Well, I'm going to start by saying it's definitely a trio. They have three great wide receivers in college, and also I think three legit prospects, two of which, depending on how they perform in the next season, could find themselves as first-round draft picks. I think one of them is almost a guaranteed first-round draft pick at this point, in AJ Brown. I think that they probably are the best at the top. South Carolina might be a little bit deeper as far as their receiver group goes, but I think I would take Ole Miss's their trio over the four that South Carolina had because I think their talent level is higher. And it starts with AJ Brown. He was the most productive one last season. They actually had a fourth guy whose last name is Jefferson, equally as productive as DeMarcus Lodge and DK Metcalf, but all three and Jefferson's transferring. But all three pale in comparison to AJ Brown and his production last season with Shea Patterson and Jordan to AMU, splitting time at quarterback after Patterson, I believe he got hurt. But AJ Brown, he's 6'1", 225. Despite being that size, he plays primarily in the slot, and almost exclusively in the slot. And he's not a traditional slot receiver. He's not Julian Edelman. He's actually more. His play style reminds me a ton of Anquan Bolden, and really how he's able to win contested catches, at all levels of the field, but especially in the middle of the field. And I think he's a good route runner, despite he lacks some top end speed, but I think he's a good route runner. He's very technically sound. And then he just has that size and that frame, that 225-pound, broad-shouldered, strong frame, and he's able to break tackles when he runs. Have the ball skills and body control to win and remain upright, and then be able to get upfield.
Yeah, out of that group, that's the only receiver I've watched out of that group. But when I watched him, that was the game against LSU where he went off for 14 receptions and 185 yards. Or no, excuse me, just Louisiana, University of Louisiana. He had 14 receptions for 185 yards, and it's like, okay, this guy's a monster. And 6'1", 225. He finished the year with 75 receptions, just over 1,200 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns. Do you think he'll translate better just staying in the slot, or do you think he could go to the outside?
I think his traits project him as more of an outside receiver in the NFL, but I think that his versatility would be valued at the fact that he has so much experience in the slot, and then he has the ability to play on the outside because this type and style of receiver that he is, that versatility could be an advantage to him as well.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see what he does against, some more of the premier talent this year, especially, like I mentioned, 14 receptions against just the University of Louisiana, but against Alabama, he only had one reception for 6 yards. Now, granted, we know Alabama, they've got something in their water over there, but it's always nice to see how he'll translate from year to year. And hopefully he doesn't pull a Calvin Ridley, who went off as a freshman with 89 receptions and then just kind of fall off a little bit. So hopefully that doesn't happen with A.J. Brown. You said Jefferson. Where did he transfer? You said A&M?
I'm not sure where Jefferson's transferring to, but he was a guy who was about equally as productive as Metcalf and DeMarcus Lodge last year. And he was also a true sophomore as well as Metcalf and A.J. Brown. So he's a guy who has potential, but looking at who they still have, DK Metcalf. Metcalf is, like I said, last year he was a fellow true sophomore as A.J. Brown, so he's the same age. So he'll be draft eligible for the first time this upcoming season. And he's a guy who probably has the most potential out of all the receivers at Ole Miss because of his frame. He's 6'4", 225, so he's similar weight, but he's longer, and he's probably has better long speed, straight line speed than A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
He's a guy who he's definitely still developing. Playing with three other viable receiving options last season, his production wasn't crazy high, but with Jefferson gone and having a full offseason to work with Ta'amu at quarterback, I think his production will definitely rise. And as he develops, he's a guy who, he's great long. He's a great deep threat. And he's a contested catch winner. When they were playing Kentucky, they were down by 10 seconds left around like the 5-yard line, and they just threw a jump ball. The play was just throw it up to DK Metcalf, just throw a jump ball, fade ball to him. He flipped his hips. He went up over the defensive back. He held on to it for the win. And he did it through a holding call too. He got 1 foot down in the back corner of the end zone. I mean, he had like 2 or 3 inches to spare. He knew exactly where he was in the field. It was kind of a sight to see the fact that they were just like, this game is just going to come down to the fact that we trust DK Metcalf to moss this corner.
Yeah.
So that's something that's, I think that will definitely be used early on in his NFL career, whenever that may be, and as he still develops. But I think potential-wise, his is probably the highest.
Right. Now, I remember watching like your Twitter feed as far as like some of the highlights that you were posting, especially with South Carolina. It might be South Carolina. Were they the team with like I know they obviously had Hayden Hurst go in the first round this past year, but don't they have like a really good tight end again, or is that Ole Miss that has a pretty solid tight end as well?
Ole Miss has a good tight end that's coming back, but he didn't produce that much. I believe the 3 receivers who are coming back at Ole Miss, A.J. Brown, DeMarcus Lodge, and DK Metcalf account for like 88% of their returning receiving yards, something like that. And that statistic was in the article that I wrote. I don't remember it specifically, but it's a crazy number of the amount of receiving yards of guys who are returning, because they did lose Jordan Wilkins too as a running back who was pretty involved. Jefferson's transferring, and then the tight end is really the only other person who had any receiving yards, which is pretty interesting, and definitely something that projects them to be kind of like the main 3 options this upcoming season. But will there be a 4th option? Will there be that next guy? That kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah, that was going to be my question as far as who could potentially be that 4th guy, especially with a guy like Jefferson transferring and things like that. But you've done one on Ole Miss and you've done one on South Carolina. Who's the next team? What was the name? What would they go by? NWO?
NWO, the Nasty Wideouts. They have a championship belt, WWE style championship belt with that on it, kind of a play on the NWA, which is like the sickest championship belt I've ever seen. I want to get one for my receivers in high school.
That's awesome. So you've done the one on Ole Miss and South Carolina, and who's coming next? Has there been another one? I can't remember.
So I've done Alabama as well. The next team remains to be seen which team I'll do. There are a few teams who have kind of a number one who's a stud, kind of like N'Keal Harry out Arizona State. NC State, I can't remember their name or their number one receiver, but he's supposed to be
Calvin Harmon, baby.
Yes, Calvin Harmon, that's correct. And there's a couple other groups, like the group up in Michigan with Peoples-Jones. So there's a few teams that I'm looking at who I want to see who continues to have a deep group. So with Ole Miss, they had 3 really, really good receivers. Alabama has 3 really good receivers, and South Carolina has 4. So I want to continue to do kind of deeper groups before I get into the teams that have maybe one guy. Mm-hmm. And then, we don't really know what's past them.
Yeah. Fulton Davis from Michigan State. He's all right. But the rest of that university, I don't know. It's in shambles right now. They're hitting
It
dogs.
is. It is.
I don't know what they're doing, man. Mike Vick's up there or something. Something's going on. All right. So moving forward, definitely check out the. I'm so rattled by our technical difficulties that we were having there. Yeah. So. Definitely check out the wide receiver stuff from Brad regarding the college wide receivers on cover1.net. It's going to be happening all summer long, getting you ready for football season. Can't wait. 81 days between now and college football. It's unbelievable that we're still that far away. This is going to be like the longest 80 days of my life. It's going to be ridiculous. Just get me to college football.
I think that's fair. Yeah, seriously. And the first week and the second week of the season are like crazy good schedules. So it's kind of like, just get me to those first 2 weeks and then the rest of the season, whatever. But those first 2 weeks are going to be awesome.
Yeah. No, there's nothing better than football season. I mean, seriously, we all know that. That's why we're all watching film all year long. But I mean, seriously, like just watching football all day, Saturday and Sunday. It's what I do. My wife hates it, but it's all good. Let's jump into the Rashan Gary at Oliver debate. It's not even really a debate, I don't think. I would honestly probably take Bosa over Gary as well, but I've seen some stuff where people think Rashan Gary could be a top 10 pick. People I work with even think Gary could go top 10. And I'm like, granted, I live in the state of Michigan, so there are a bunch of homers. And he could. I mean, he very well could. But I don't know. I think he plays out of position. He plays as an edge. He should play inside. And I guess that's why I'm bringing the debate, because Ed Oliver is going to play as a defensive tackle, and you've got him as probably a true nose right now, and he is just one athletic freak. I mean, he's a monster. I don't know if over the last 5 years I've seen somebody as talented as him athletically. You know what I mean? Outside of maybe Clowney.
Right.
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Where do you project Ed Oliver at the next level as far as position? Is he a true nose? Is he a defensive tackle in a 4-3? Is he a defensive end in a 3-4?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely brings you that versatility to play either one, from in a 4-3 or as a 3-4 as a nose. Personally, I'm playing him probably as a one technique. He's 6'3", 290. So, yeah, you could definitely play him as a 3 technique. And with his athletic ability, you could probably even play him as a 5. But, I mean, I'm playing him inside because of just the disruptiveness that he brings. Like, I thought Mo Hurst was very disruptive at Michigan at 6'1", and obviously, unfortunately, the heart issue moved him down a lot of boards because he probably would have been a first-round pick for sure. But Ed Oliver, over the last 2 years, has 38.5 tackles for loss, 10.5 sacks, 138 total tackles, and you've probably seen it on Twitter by now, some of the footwork drills that he's been doing, and it's like, yeah. Dude, I don't know if I've ever seen that from somebody that size, 6'3", 290. Like it's scary, scary Aaron Donald good. And Aaron Donald was 13th overall or something, 12th overall. So that was a clear miss by a lot of teams, and my team included, the Detroit Lions. They took freaking Eric Ebron instead. Ed Oliver's probably going to play inside. I would play him as a one technique, and right now, I don't see why he wouldn't go first overall. I mean, obviously it depends on who's picking first, but he should go first overall. The guy's a beast.
Is his potential higher than what Aaron Donald is? Is it equal to what Aaron Donald is? Or is no one really going to be able to reach that level that Donald's playing at currently?
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's tough because it's like I always try to let guys just be themselves, and I feel like if you're trying to reach the level of somebody else, like when you're looking at a receiver, you might want to be the next Randy Moss, but if you want to be that Randy Moss type of player, you have to work as hard as Randy Moss did. And granted, Randy Moss had some crazy stuff off the field and on the field, but he was phenomenal. And he was just like that natural born athlete or naturally gifted athlete. And the same with, at Oliver. But Oliver's probably going to hold himself back, if anything. But certainly I would think he could reach the Aaron Donald type of level where he could play anywhere. He can do anything. He's going to, kill the stat sheet. He's going to be just everything that you need in a defense and somebody that you build around. So I love it.
All right. So what about Rashan Gary? Is he, where do you see his natural fit at the next level? And as far as his potential, where does his potential in the NFL fall for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's still early, and we've got the whole year to go, and we've got to see what Don Brown does, and that's one of the benefits is having Don Brown as his defensive coordinator. And honestly, who knows where he gets drafted? But Don Brown could be like the best defensive coordinator he ever has. So it makes me wonder, like,
Right. Yeah.
if he gets to the next level, what if somebody doesn't utilize him properly? But if I'm getting my hands on him at the next level, I'm playing him inside because he's playing as an edge a lot of the time. And I think part of that is because of Mo Hurst. I know Mo Hurst has that versatility where he played everywhere for Michigan. And they've got a guy like Chase Winovich who is very, very talented. I think probably the most underrated player as far as like edge rushers go in the Big Ten. And maybe a lot of people know how good he is, but he's very talented too. But Gary, play him inside. He's got the ability to do those line stunts and things like that. But with his size and physical ability, I think they were saying like he's going to run like a 4.62 or something. Like that's what he tested at Michigan's spring combine or something, which is ridiculous.
Michigan is like historically known to fabricate their numbers.
Like I wouldn't be surprised if he came out and ran like a 4.75 or something, which is still very good, but at the same time, like it's not a 4.62. And maybe he runs like a 4.68. I don't even care about that, but I like to see him play inside. I think just with his thick build and his explosiveness, you can get a lot more with him where he's working inside leverage on a offensive guard where he's got some length compared to playing on a tackle where the length might match up. So that's just my opinion.
As far as Michigan goes, this upcoming season, watch out for rising sophomore Kwity Paye as well. He's a defensive end from Rhode Island. He's was on the 2 deep all of last season. I was kind of hoping Winovich was going to the NFL so Paye could get a little more burn this upcoming season, but he should be a rotational guy, and I think that he's about to break out. And like you said, having Don Brown as the defensive coordinator is never going to hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely helped even with a guy like Lavert Hill, who when we were in Mobile, me and Eric Turner, we watched him one of those nights just drinking beers and watching Lavert Hill, and he is freaky good, like just flipping the hips, getting upfield, staying in your hip pocket as a corner. So he's definitely a defensive back to pay attention to as well. Michigan's got some talent. They've just got a bonehead for a head coach. I mean, that's what it is. He's 1-5 against his rivals, and he sucks. So it is what it is. Yeah, so Ed Oliver over Rashan Gary, enough said. Don't look back. Let's jump into top 10 wide receivers and get this thing out. You did a great piece, by the way, on wide receiver duos in the NFL, and I thought it was very, very good. And you guys got to check that out as well over at cover1.net. But we're talking individually top 10 wide receivers. Now, I'm doing a numerical ranking, and I think Brad is going to go on a little rant here. So top 10 wide receivers moving forward with this. Like I said, Brad is going to probably bash me for having a numerical ranking because he believes in tiers and not numerical rankings. And maybe he does believe in numerical rankings, but it is what it is. So I can't wait for him to get on a rant about it. But number one, it's got to be Antonio Brown, right? That's like the consensus.
Let me get this out of the way first before we get into this whole thing. I don't dislike ordering players in a ranking. What I dislike is being rigid and saying, what's your top 5? What's your top 10? Because there could be, say you're doing a top 5, there could be 4 guys in the first tier or 4 guys who have separated themselves from the rest. And then there could be a next group of 4 or 5 guys. And how do you really choose one from a group that are all kind of similar to put into that fifth spot when really you're saying, oh, these are the top 5, but he doesn't really belong with the 4 that are ahead of him. He belongs with the 4 or 5 that are he should be with between 5 and 8. You know what I mean? So we're looking at, think about in the world, there's hundreds of millions of people who can catch passes or can run around and catch passes. And even at a good or decent level, there's probably millions of people who can do it at a pretty solid level. Guys who played in high school, guys who played in college, guys who are still athletic enough to do it. And we're looking at the top 20 or so, 25 or so in the world who can do it, comparing these like minuscule, minute differences in talent between them and trying to put them in a numerical order. I think that the practice is better off saying these are guys in their tier. It's better off saying this is the group of guys that he's similar to, rather than deciding if he's the 13th best or the 17th best. You go by the tiers and you say these are the guys he's similar to, and that's more important. to me. So with that said, yes, Antonio Brown's the top receiver in the NFL. He's my number one, and Julio Jones is my number two. And the cutoff, I think, for the top tier is right there. I think that Antonio Brown is a guy who he has every trait that you could want out of a wide receiver, despite being undersized. He's a good route runner. He moves around the formation. He has the hands, the ball skills, the body control. He can win at all levels. Despite being undersized, he has every single trait that you could ask for. The only thing you could ask for from him more is to be larger, and he's not larger, but that's fine because he still produces at an elite level. He is a guy who is an outlier in the sense that his combine drills don't reflect his overall athleticism, his on-field athleticism, I should say, and he's the best receiver in football. And I have Julio Jones second. I think that Julio, he's a guy who has that all the athletic ability and size in the world that you could ever want. I think that he is he's not a great route runner as far as consistency goes, but he's a good route runner in flashes. Everyone remembers the post corner route this past season that he hit, commonly called a 5x3, and he catches a post corner, like shakes the defender off, and then made that ridiculous dive to the pylon. Mm-hmm. And he is. So there are flashes of great route running, but he's more of a guy who wins with this size and with this athleticism, which is fine because he gets it done. Statistically. But I would just put him below Antonio Brown because I think Antonio Brown on a consistent basis has more elite traits.
Yeah, and I don't mean to sound like Marcus Mosher on this, or however the hell you say his last name, but one thing that bothers me with Julio, and I'm not trying to be like that guy, but dude, he only has one season double-digit touchdowns, and it's like how do you only have 10 touchdowns at the most in one season? Like, as big as you are and as good as you are, like, what are they doing in Atlanta? What's Matt Ryan doing not getting you the football in the end zone? Because Antonio Brown, since 2010, has 733 receptions. He's got 59 touchdowns. It's more than Julio. And, over the last, 5 years now, he's got over 100 receptions in every year. And 5 of those seasons, in those 5 seasons, he's got 8 touchdowns or more. He scores touchdowns. He's phenomenal.
Right.
And
I think that's the difference. I think that's the difference between them because they do have comparable quarterback play as well. With Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger, they're at least similarly skilled, especially in the last 4 to 5 years. And Brown gets in the end zone more. So I think that's honestly what separates Brown from Julio. But I think that they are in that top tier. Those two have separated themselves from everybody else.
Right. Yeah. So, and Julio's not my number 2. So, I can't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm just saying that's something that frustrates me with Julio Jones, also as a fantasy owner of him last year, where he dropped the ball in week 15 and didn't get me to the championship. All I needed was one catch, man, for 10 yards. Ridiculous.
So who's the number 2 for you?
So it's Antonio Brown 1, Julio number 2, and then my number 3. I didn't do it in tiers, of course, but my number, and I agree with you on the tiers too, but I just didn't do it in tiers because I'm lazy. Number 3 for me is Larry Fitzgerald. He doesn't. I don't think he gets enough credit. He's had over 100 receptions the last 3 years each season, and I think he's just. And this is a guy that's playing with Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. The guy is going out there with Drew Stanton as quarterback, and he's making it happen. He might not have all the yards in the world. He might not have all the touchdowns in the world. They're not winning a ton of games in Arizona, but you know what? And I get it as far as talent, upside goes. AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, one of our guys, Adam Thielen. But realistically, I think, or in OBJ too. But Fitzgerald has just been consistent over his career. And I think he gets kind of dogged. So that's my number 3.
I think Fitzgerald historically would be in my second tier, in the 5 to 8 or 9 range. But I think currently I don't have him in the top 12. I think he's probably in the top 15 or 16, but I don't have him in the top 12, which, by the way, I'm doing 12 receivers for this top 10. But moving forward, my second tier is 3 guys. So it would round out the top 5, but the 3 are DeAndre Hopkins at Odell Beckham Jr. at 4 and AJ Green at 5. I think that those 3 are kind of in similar play at similar levels. Odell obviously getting into this past year kind of hurt his stock, but I think that he's still up there in the top 5. I think DeAndre Hopkins is really very close to really passing up Julio, is getting close to passing up Julio Jones because kind of similar to what you're talking about with Fitzgerald. He produces with subpar quarterback play. And then when he did have Deshaun Watson this past season for 6 games, he was absolutely tearing it up. He's a guy who just has hands of glue and can win contested catches like it's going out of style. It's really kind of probably the best to be able to do it since prime Anquan Bolden or even maybe Randy Moss.
Right.
But I think that those three are the next tier for me is DeAndre Hopkins third, Odell Beckham at fourth, and AJ Green fifth.
No doubt. And I've got it, same actually. OBJ at 4, Hopkins at 5, and, AJ Green's my 6th because I got Fitzgerald in there at 3. So
right.
Essentially the same. And, I mean, that's not me, like, dogging AJ Green. I like him, but he's not as good as OBJ and Hopkins. It's just like everything you mentioned. And
I agree.
And Hopkins, I think, is only going to get better, too. Like, he had an off year 2 years ago, bounced back really well last year, and I think he's just going to really take off moving forward. So, number 7 on my board, and I think you got to go like 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever you're doing. But 7 for me is Mike Evans. So
nice.
Yes.
So Mike Evans is my number 6. I've held since their pre-draft process that I would rather have Mike Evans on my team than Odell Beckham Jr., Sammy Watkins, and Brandon Cooks. Yeah, Brandon Cooks. Because one, I think that he could win in multiple, and I still believe that to this day, might I add. I think he could win in more ways than the outside. He's a guy who doesn't need the accuracy from a quarterback, as you can see, because he plays with an inaccurate QB. And still produces that a guy like Odell or Jarvis Landry might need a little bit more of. And I think that his character is a little bit higher than a guy like Odell Beckham. He doesn't come with the antics. And I think he goes about his day and he does his job. He's I think he's underrated because Jameis Winston didn't have such a good season, but I think he's another guy kind of like Hopkins, just going to move forward and just get better as he moves forward. And my third tier, so this is 6, 7, 8, and 9, and this is why I would dislike saying a top 10 because I only have up to 9 in this tier, is Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Michael Thomas, and Adam Thielen. I think that those 4 guys are grouped similarly. I think that of the 4, I love all 4 of them. Like I said, I've loved Mike Evans since he was in college, but I think that Evans has the potential to really, really skyrocket, whereas the other 3, I don't know if they do, but I think those are 3 guys who are going to be considered in the top 10 for a long time because none of the 3 are old. Keenan Allen is getting better. He's a great route runner. Michael Thomas is as well, and Adam Thielen is as well. Those are 3 of the best route runners in the NFL. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So I think that this tier is safely in their respective rankings, and that Mike Evans has potential to move ahead of AJ Green, move ahead of Odell Beckham moving forward. Yeah,
I like Michael Thomas as well a lot, and people in Tampa Bay just get used to Mike Evans. You guys obviously know from back in March when he signed the 5-year, $82.5 million contract. So he'll be with Tampa for a while, and he needs to get used to Jameis Winston being inaccurate as hell. So, and his inconsistencies. But so Evans was my 7th. Thomas was my 8th. I love that you had Keenan Allen in there. I like Keenan Allen a lot. I don't have him in my top 10, but I've got Adam Thielen at 9, and to close out my top 10, everybody's going to hate it, but screw you, Demaryius Thomas. Screw you.
All right. I don't hate that. I still like Demaryius Thomas, and I still have the Broncos in my top 5 duos with him and Emmanuel Sanders. He's not in my top 12. I think that Keenan Allen is a guy who his potential is higher, and maybe it's inflated because he was really the main target this past year with a Hall of Fame quarterback. But I think he's a little bit underrated as far as the scope of the NFL goes. To round out my top 12, I think that I have T.Y. Hilton at 10, Doug Baldwin at 11, and Stephon Diggs at 12. 3 guys who I think are also very similar in style, and also 3 guys who are great route runners. And obviously, people know that I'm a little bit jaded towards the guys who are better route runners. But I think that those 3 are in a tier as well. T.Y. Hilton's obviously very explosive. Doug Baldwin is a technician, and Stephon Diggs runs some routes that can just embarrass defenders. And he's a guy who, with Kirk Cousins, could produce even more. Doug Baldwin's producing for years with Russell Wilson and T.Y. Hilton. Though it was a little bit up and down this past season, not having Andrew Luck, he still produced a good amount of yards. He was kind of volatile, but that's okay. You only get Jacoby Brissett at QB. It's kind of to be expected. I still think his explosiveness is there, and I still think that he is a home run type of player. But I do want to talk about the fact that in that ranking, I don't want to discount guys like Golden Tate and Marvin Jones and Demaryius Thomas and Tyreek Hill and Emmanuel Sanders and Devontae Adams and all those other guys, Brandon Cooks, all those other guys who are kind of right there and could be right there, and is really just dependent on role in the offense, how they played this past season, their quarterback play from this past season, or maybe even how I'm feeling that day, to be honest with you, because it's so close. It's so tightly packed that Trevor Sickam always talks about how this is a golden age of wide receivers, and I really do agree with it because I think there's 25 guys that you could say are top 10 receiver. That if you talk to, a couple of different people, there are probably 25 names pop up in top 10s. So I think that is so deep, and despite this being my top 12 and my top 4 tiers, that it's not. These guys haven't really separated themselves from others, from the next group of guys. I think that group would be super deep, and guys who could easily jump up into the top 10 with a good 2018-2019 season.
Yeah, I agree, man. I completely agree. There are at least 20, 25 receivers in this league that you can say, hey, I could build something around this player. I can get some really nice complement weapons around that player. They can help with a quarterback's growth or a veteran guy, whatever it is. And, I mean, you even saw it with Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, helping out a guy like Case Keenum. So, I mean, there's so much to it. And, in Detroit, Matthew Stafford's, while he's, had it easy with guys like Calvin Johnson, he's made things happen with guys like Golden Tate and Marvin Jones. And those guys have bailed him out of trouble. He's also bailed them out of trouble. It works hand in hand, and there's so many good receivers in this league. And there's even players, Jamison Crowder, Mohamed Sanu. There's so I'm not saying those guys are, top 10 guys, but when you get into those tiers and you move down the list and you get into those duos, those guys definitely could be discussed down the line. So I do want to ask.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned guys like Josh Gordon who could go off this next year. If he's back to his 2013 form and be considered in the top 5. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, because we just don't know what we're going to get out of him this next year. So right. It's incredibly deep. Even Sammy Watkins, I haven't even mentioned him, but he has the explosiveness and he's still young. He has the ability to grow, and he could be a guy who is someday mentioned in the top 5 as well.
Right. Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp.
And Dante Pettis. So
wide receiver 1, baby. And you bring up Josh Gordon. That's a great point too. I mean, that trio is just dirty. Corey Coleman, Josh Gordon, and Jarvis Landry. I'm not the biggest Landry fan, but I mean, still, you've got those 2 receivers plus him in the slot. I mean, Tyrod Taylor could easily be a top 15 quarterback this year if he does it right. He doesn't turn the football over. So I don't know.
You haven't even mentioned Njoku out there too, who is just an absolute freak of nature. Like him, and think about the fact that they have him and Josh Gordon. I haven't talked about this, but I've been laying in bed, looking up at my ceiling, can you imagine Josh Gordon, David Njoku in the same field? What do you do? How do you cover that? There's no way to cover that.
No, you really.
There's no way to do it.
Because you're going to start loading the box. You're going to load the box against Nick Chubb. You're going to leave the middle of the field wide open. If you leave the middle of the field, or if you cover the middle of the field, the box is wide open, and then Nick Chubb's going. I mean, they've got the weapons to be very good. Cleveland could be very good. I'm excited. Yeah. One last question, so we get out of here. Dez Bryant still unsigned, last I checked, and Brandon Marshall signed with Seattle. Where is Dez Bryant going?
This is tough because I haven't really been up on the news as far as where he's been visiting. I know he said no to the Ravens. Seattle could have been a good landing spot for him. I've seen the 49ers floated out there as a potential landing spot, and I wouldn't like that in the sense that I want Pettis to play a lot, but I think I wouldn't dislike that in case as just a guy who's a 50-50 ball winner for Garoppolo, kind of like a bail him out when he's in a tight situation. They just kind of throw it up to Dez. Worst case scenario, it's probably incomplete. But I think that they have Garcon, they have Marquise Goodwin, they have Trent Taylor, and then they have Dante Pettis. And then they have other rookies like Richie James that they brought in, Steven Numbar that they brought in. They have other guys behind them too. That's kind of like open competition for that 5th and possibly 6th spot. I think that with the addition of Dez Bryant, that would be definitely round out that their top 5 receivers and potentially give Garoppolo just that safety valve of that big body on the outside. So I think that would be the most likely landing spot. And they're a team who's not necessarily pressured to win 11 games this season. They could kind of experiment a little bit more. So I think that, but obviously I think that they have the potential to win 10 or 11 games. So I think that's a team that it's possible that he could end up in San Fran.
Right. I'm going to say Tennessee, because it just seems like every single time there's a pretty decent veteran receiver out there, or he's pretty good, right? Dez Bryant's pretty good.
He's good.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
he's pretty good. So, no, every single time there's a good receiver out there, I just feel like he goes to Tennessee or something, ends up there somehow. So I'll just say them just for the sake of conversation. But I'm excited to see where he lands. It's weird that he hasn't landed anywhere yet. So I'm sure the news will break now that we've talked about it, because I feel like that's the trend. Whenever we talk about something happens with that said player. You got anything else?
It's because of our sources. Our sources tell us these things.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, we don't even watch the film anyways. We look at the box scores and blocking, blocking doesn't matter for receivers anyways. So it's okay wherever it does go.
It never has.
No, never has, ever mattered. You got anything else for the people?
I do not. I think definitely just continue to check out the content at cover1.net, the series of articles that I'm doing on the wide receiver groups, college football. Really trying to get into some NFL film this summer as well. I've looked at, Adam Thielen. I've looked at those old Andrew Hawkins videos. Definitely follow my YouTube page that I just started. Subscribe. I'm already over 100 subscribers. And I also found out you can't see who subscribed to your page, which annoyed me because I wanted to subscribe to their pages too.
Yeah.
I thought that you could do it like Twitter, but I guess you can't do that. But if you have subscribed and you want me to subscribe to your page, shoot me a DM on Twitter or tweet on Twitter, and I'll do that too. So that's all I got for you.
In 2 years, you're going to have a YouTube plaque for 1 million subscribers. It's going to be insane. Can't wait for it.
I don't think so.
Hey, you never know. Follow Brad on Twitter at BradKelly17. You got me at Russ NFL Draft. Hit that follow button and be sure to check out all the great content with the Cover One app that you can download today on your app store in iTunes or Google Play. However you go about your business, put it on your tablet, whatever it is. Appreciate you guys joining us for a shaky episode 64, but it's done. It's in the books. And for Brad Kelly, I'm Russell Brown. We will talk to you guys next week for Cover One, the NFL Draft Podcast.